Alrighty, hello again everyone. This is episode 3 of my educational podcast. Today we will be focusing on The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. This was written in 1894, actually only 2 years after The Yellow Wallpaper was written. And you'll notice that many, in fact the majority of pieces of feminist literature come from that age. And of course that's because women didn't have it too well back then, which actually ties into my theme, right? Alright, so basically the rundown of The Story of an Hour is that, and mind you, this piece is perhaps more heavily laden with irony than all of the rest combined, and packed into a much smaller frame too. Anyways, the basic rundown of the Story of an Hour is that this woman comes down the stairs one day, and one of her friends and her sister are waiting there to tell her some bad news. And the bad news is that her husband has died in a train accident. And now she has a heart condition. We'll come back to that later. She has a heart condition, and so they try to break it to her as easily as they possibly can, as gently. And so she breaks down, she cries, etc. All the things that you would expect from someone who just lost their husband. And so after a while, after she's done crying, she goes up, locks herself in her room, and sits in this chair and just stares out the window. And she starts to realize that she's not necessarily sad, and that bothers her. Like, she feels, I should be sad. My husband just died. I was sad 5 minutes ago. Why am I not sad now? Anyways, she just starts to realize that she's not sad. So this feeling starts to creep up on her, and she realizes she's free. She's completely free. She can live for herself now. She realizes that she sort of did love her husband, but not really. No, it was more of an obligation for her because of, once again, societal standards, as you'll see with every other piece we're focusing on here. And so then she's imbued with this newfound sense of freedom, and she's just like, yeah, I'm gonna go out and live for myself. She notices all the beautiful things in the world, and she walks back down the stairs with her sister. She's all proud and she's all mighty, and her husband walks in the door. There was a mistake. He wasn't in the train accident. So she sees him and has an enormous heart attack and dies. See where I said that really heavy irony came in? That was that. Yeah. But anyways, so that's the basic rundown of this. Now, this piece is it's less into the symbolism than the other pieces. Now, it's still there, obviously, but we are going to focus mostly on syntax and diction, as well as color schemes for this one. Although, once again, the color scheme is not as strong in this one. However, there is still a color scheme. The color scheme here in this piece is white, and as you will see, I am wearing white. And yes, that is Mickey Mouse on my shirt. This is the only white shirt I have. Anyway, white is the color of purity. White is the color of freedom. White is the color of all that is good, and white is the color of light, obviously. Now we're going to focus on freedom here. Once again, obviously. And what happens is, as she's sitting there in that chair looking out the window, and she starts to notice all these wonderful things that are going on in the world that she never noticed before because she was too wrapped up in her own depression. The clouds, white clouds, and the sunlight, basically white sunlight, when it glares in your eyes, it's pretty white, it's not yellow or red or anything, starts to almost reach down to her through the window. And what that is that's her allusion to that sense of freedom coming in. That sense of freedom is not, she's not going with it of her own will. That sense of freedom is coming down through the window, and it is picking her up, and it is bringing her out of her grief. Involuntarily, she wants no part she wants no part in this, and it's still happening. She can't help it. Now, we're going to go into. I'm going to read you a couple. I'm going to read you a couple excerpts from the piece, and we're going to look at the syntax and the diction and see how you can tell that it's A, involuntary, and B, that it is freedom, a positive emotion that she's feeling in this sad time. Because if you don't know how to interpret the syntax and the diction and the word placement, etc., you could possibly think that this was in fact a really depressing story. And it is a really depressing story, but there would be no antithesis to that. There would be no positive end going to it. So I'm going to read you a couple excerpts here. She could see in the open square before her the tops of the trees that were all a-quiver with the new spring life. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below a peddler was crying his wares. The notes of a distant song, which someone was singing, reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a pretty frickin' positive paragraph right there, alright? That's all the connotations of these words in context are pretty positive. For example, a quiver with a new spring life. Life is pretty positive. Life is a good thing, as opposed to death, yeah? The delicious breath of rain was in the air. Delicious is a good thing. Delicious is a great thing. I don't sit there and go, oh, that's delicious. It doesn't happen like that. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares. That one is slightly less obvious, but it still conveys that sense of livelihood, which she didn't have before because she was all depressed and locked up with her husband. Notes of a distant song in which someone was singing reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. I like to sing songs. People usually sing songs when they're happy. Sparrows twittering in the eaves? It's a pretty happy sound. It's a pretty free sound, is the point here. Sparrows are free. They can do whatever they want. Go wherever they want. Now she can too. Now she can do and go whatever and wherever she wants, because she doesn't have to worry about society looking down upon her for not following the orders of her husband. Another excerpt. I cannot talk tonight. Another excerpt. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it, fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name. But she felt it, creeping out of the sky, reaching toward her through sound, the scents, the color that filled the air. Now, this is tying into what I said earlier, which was that she doesn't want to feel the freedom. In fact, she's very disturbed to feel the freedom. She, in her mind, thinks that she should still be mourning over the death of her husband, which that would be a normal thing to do. So, she's not really wrong. But we have more hints here that the freedom itself, even though unwanted, is not a negative thing. For example, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. I don't know about you guys, but I like sounds, scents, and color. I like to be able to hear, smell, and see things, yes? It's positive connotations here. What else do we have? She did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death, the face that had never looked save with love upon her, fixed and grey and dead. But she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely, and she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. Now, monstrous joy. That again being our hint that she is not fully accepting of the fact that she's done grieving as of yet. Let's see. Now, she knew that she would weep again. Obviously, she doesn't want to be done grieving. She wants to weep again. She doesn't necessarily want to, but for her it would be a confirmation of the fact that she's not empty or hollow. Something like that. And the fact that he never looked save with love upon her, now that points to the fact that, you know, he wasn't that bad of a guy. Maybe he didn't treat her badly, but it was still not a good situation for her, because maybe she was forced into that marriage by her parents. Doesn't mean he was a bad guy, just means maybe they weren't right for each other. You know, and as with many women in that time, you know, that's how it was. You were forced into these relationships or these marriages because it was profitable or prudent at the time. And then she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. So here she has finally accepted the freedom. She has finally accepted that, yes, it is a sad thing that he is dead, but now my life is mine. I'm not shackled anymore. Let's see. Yes, here's where the irony starts to play in. Her fancy was running riot along those days ahead of her. Spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday that she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. Alright, spring days, summer days, all sorts of days that would be her own. Her own. No one else's. So there's that freedom again. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. Now, that right there is really, really, really heavy foreshadowing. And if you don't know what foreshadowing is when you use verbal or situational irony to sort of outwardly say the antithesis of something that's going to happen, implying that what will actually happen will be something that's not expected. Of course, now it's expected because you foreshadowed it. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. So there's that allusion to her being trapped again in that situation. Trapped by her husband, trapped by society, trapped by herself, because she didn't have the strength to leave. Didn't have the strength to defy society. And then the very last line, after she finds out that he's alive, when she sees him coming up the stairs. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of the joy that kills. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not any heart disease. She was in severe depression. She came out of it, and she was feeling better than she probably ever had in her life, being a woman in that time. And, you know, that's a big emotional change. And to have that brought all away from you in a split second, that would destroy me. So, the irony here really being that it wasn't joy at all. And the irony being that it wasn't a heart disease either. It was a lack of positive emotion, or really a sudden removal of positive emotion. Because emotions are very important, and emotions are your expression of freedom. Freedom. The whole theme of this piece is freedom. See where we're going with this? Alright. That's about it for the analyzation of the piece itself. But to tie this back in to my main theme, which again was, if you have not watched the other videos, disparity is required to create change. From what we gather from this piece, her life was pretty boring, pretty normal, pretty bland, blasé, dull, whatever, before she found out that her husband died. And so that was a drastic change. And the disparity of the situation was there was nowhere for her to go. She was done for. She was out. She gave up. And she decided, you know what, I'll stay locked in this for the rest of my life. She thought with a sigh that life might be long. So she was trapped there. And then this change came about, and it was a positive change, as it usually is when such a large event happens, no matter what the event may be, negative or positive. It was a large positive change, and so that's how it ties in with the rest. But you have to remember that it was all ripped away. It was all ripped away from her, and death itself was the final change for her. It was the final break from the norm. And yeah, that's about it. So we're going to come back in a little while for video number 4, on Sylvia Plath's poem Metaphors. So, bye.